Terrific. Aloha mai kako, aloha.
Aloha.
Can you can hear, I can even shout and you can hear me, even though Kyle is probably going to turn this up. Welcome to the Beer Summit. You can see there's no beer here. And for some of you who've not been here before, the Beer Summit dates back to Joe the Plumber and President Obama, in case you hadn't heard about that story. There was a little bit of a contention publicly. And when the president said, well, look, come on, Joe, come on over and go to the Rose Garden. We'll have a beer and we'll straighten things out. Well, we've been doing this for about 10 years. We started in the, how would you say, 2013, I think it was at the Kona Brewery up until we had the pandemic. And they found that they didn't have employees and we were out on the agenda, the veranda or the lanai there. And they said, well, we don't have anybody to serve there, so we're going to put a Volkswagen bus in there, if you've seen it recently. And nobody's eating, it's a waiting room. So we went across the way to the Greek Marina. And I know, have all of you guys eaten your dinner already? Because there was a bit of a problem getting, I think the Greek Marina thought we were going to have a big ticket. So we talked to the good manager here, Robin Flanagan. How many of you are members of the of the Oahu Club? Any of you members? Okay, my wife is in the back. She's an aerobic exerciser. She's trying to get me to join, but I'm a jogger still, so I'm not. But in fact, some of you said this was your first time at the Oahu Club. In fact, the good judge said that that was the case. So it's a beautiful place. Henry Kaiser had envisioned it from the beginning. And basically what we have is, it's a leadership forum. We bring leaders of the community. We've had from the governor to the mayors to, I think more recently we had the chief of staff the senior advisor to the governor who talked about a lot of things. And last month, we had the representative from Lahaina, Ellie Cochran, whose district basically burned down. Some of you may have heard her on that. And by the way, this is on YouTube. If you miss it or somebody said, hey, what did Judge Foley say today? It's on you. Jillian, the office manager, how do they go to look at what we have recorded? Search Rep Ward, and then it'll go to the YouTube channel. And that is how we keep a record of what's going on. Just a couple of highlights that have flown away. In your handout, you see the headlines of, we're about to undergo some changes with our streets. And some of you know Hawaii Kai Drive because you drive on it every day. We're taking a poll as to whether you'd like to see what the Department of Transportation wants to make a 3-lane, with 2 lanes basically with a turn lane in the middle. I find that probably works well on the mainland, but to do all the way from the Hawaii Kai Drive beginning at the Moanaloan, all the way up to Keahole, or Kealaho, that's something I think we need to think about and to look at. So that is a pending thing. That's a big issue. But the biggest thing I want to bring to your attention is what we've been planning since May 21. None of you remember what May 21, but I remember my brother, Senator Sam Sloan, passed away. On the back of the newsletter is the final and hopefully the last logistical barrier that we have. We are now at the Capitol this Sunday. This Sunday, Sam Sloan is going to be having a celebration of life. The governor himself will be coming. I was quite surprised, but very blessed by hearing that. Senator Donna Kim will be speaking in person, as well as former Congresswoman Colleen Hanabusa. And then we have a number of testimonies. Some people could make it, Governor Lingle, Senator Hemmings, and a number of other in writing ceremonies. So if you can come out, there's a treat at the end, and this is right from this the last will and testament of Senator Sloan, hot dogs and Pepsis. Everybody's got to get a hot dog and a Pepsi. And that's kind of thematic of what Sam was, a man of the people. You know, he didn't say filet mignon or something, hi, makirimat. Sam wants everybody to be like he was and to share in that. So if you can make it, it's this Sunday, Hawaii State Capitol at noon, and it'll go for probably a couple of hours. Having said that, I have the honor of introducing His Honor. I've never been able to say that before, His Honor. And I've just learned, and why we're running a little bit over time, late starting out. He's a former Peace Corps volunteer. I was going to give all the kudos about law school, but if any of you have been to South Africa, or particularly Lesotho, the good Judge Dan Foley was a Peace Corps volunteer in Lesotho. And I know we have a member of the Foreign Service who may have been in the Foreign Service. Well, Mr. Monk, were you in Lesotho before? Okay, we may not have a Lesotho question. But what we've got is someone who has a wealth of experience as being a judge, and one who's been with the ACLU, one who I commend because he's for the rights of the people. And with that, he earned a reputation that the Speaker of the House, Scott Psyche, appointed him to the standards of conduct. In other words, what are the legislators doing not very well that they can improve on? What are some of the guidelines legislatively that we can be changing some of the behavior? As you know, some of those in our House and some of those in our Senate, or one of both, have been imprisoned. And I think that was the catalyst that created this. And we've got a number of, he's going to talk about the bills that we put together, those that have passed, and Judge, we want to talk about those that have failed. The irony is you're sitting and looking at two of the polar opinions of the judges are the top of the food chain for credibility and honesty, and I'm on the political side with the least of that, even though I don't believe I would be the least of those. But I want you to have a nice Hawaii Kai warm welcome to Judge Dan Foley. Dan, it's all yours.
Thank you. Everybody hear me okay back there? So Jeannie and I go way back. Quite often, since I was the ACLU lawyer, we would find ourselves on opposite sides of an issue. But he's a dear friend, always been a gentleman, always does his homework. You can't hear me? Now you can.
A little bit louder.
Thank you.
A little bit closer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's
So it
Max.
was the regular session of 2022 when two legislators,
A little bit closer, Dan.
two legislators were indicted for taking bribes. Tai English in the House and Kalani, Tai Cullen in the House, Kalani English in the Senate. And they weren't the only ones. As you know, at that time, we had the Kealoha scandal, chief of police, top prosecutor. We had public corruption across the islands.
If it's not, that's okay.
The Big Island, Kauai, Maui, Honolulu, all surrounding the mayor, the planning, permit department. And so I got a call from Scott Psyche. I had taught civil rights at the law school, and he was in my class in 1991, my first class. And I had worked with him and Tom Kaufman on the biography of Justice Nakamura. I respectfully dissent. He appointed me a task force to review the Judicial Selection Commission. So I knew him well, and he knew I wasn't afraid of a tough issue. So he called me up. He said, I want to create a commission. He said, we have to do something. This is out of hand. And so he drafted a resolution, House Resolution number 9, to create a commission to improve standards of conduct. And it was to look at the ethics and campaign spending laws and lobbying laws to make recommendations to the legislature. And on that commission, he put me at the chair as a retired judge, the executive director of the State Ethics Commission, Robert Harris, the executive director of the Campaign Spending Commission, Kristen Izumi Natao, Barbara Mason, Janet Mason, the League of Women Voters, Barbara Maramoto, former Republican legislator, Sandy Ma of Common Cause Hawaii, and the former U.S. Attorney Flo Nakakuni. So it was a commission that had a range of expertise. And initially, they gave us a very tight deadline during the 22 session. It was in February, and to make recommendations by the end of March. And for those of you that have been involved with the legislature, you realize that there's all these deadlines as bills proceed and bills die. And by the time we had a chance to look, we had to identify the bills that were still alive, that dealt with ethics, campaign spending, lobbying, identify them, and make recommendations. We didn't have time to have public hearings. We jumped into it. And 7 of the bills we recommended pass were passed by the legislature, and 2 were vetoed by the governor, Governor Ige at the time. The most significant bill that passed was to ban fundraisers during the legislative session. It didn't appear good that legislators were asking for money and doing favors during the session for the people giving them the money. So we recommended that legislators and candidates for the legislature could not do fundraisers during the session. The legislature passed the bill, but for some reason broadened it, so all state and county officials running for election couldn't do fundraisers during the legislative session. That became law. We recommended that the people have greater access to public records. If you go to the state agency, you request public records, they'll charge you. And if you don't have people with a lot of money have no trouble getting public records, but the average citizen sometimes can't afford it. So we recommended a bill that put caps on what the state could charge, caps on the service fee they could charge for researching and segregating records, and an exemption for a request that met a public purpose, and we modeled public purpose after the Federal Freedom of Information Act. The governor vetoed that. We also, because his various state agencies didn't want to be bothered. If anybody could request a record, that's more work for them.
This was Ige again, right?
Governor Ige. And then another one was to, in terms of preservation of public records, we recommended a bill that the legislature passed that state agencies would have to post video and audio recordings of their meetings and keep them online. And that was vetoed as well. So the session ended, and then our next deadline was going to be December 1 of 2022. So we started scheduling public hearings in all the areas, we ended up holding 13 public hearings over the period from May up until around November or so. We had national and local experts in every area. Everything was posted online. You can still find it. If you just Google Commission to Improve Standards of Conduct, you go to the legislative page where you will find a record of all our public hearings, the YouTube, the minutes, and the written testimony. So at the end of that, we submitted a report and recommendations to the legislature on December 1, a 396-page report. We were serious. And we recommended 28 bills, 3 resolutions to pass. It was we were created, the commission, by a House resolution, and we were mandated to report to the House, not the Senate. So we submitted our report to the House, our recommendations to the House. Speaker Psyche introduced every measure we recommended, and Judiciary Chair David Tarnas held public hearings on every single measure we introduced. So it was very transparent. Of the 28 bills that we recommended, 20 passed. Now, for any of you that have been involved in the legislature, commissions, and task force, that's a remarkable record. To have 20 of 28 measures pass in the very session they were introduced. And all but 2 measures moved out of the House over to the Senate. The two that didn't move was term limits, which we recommended. That died in the House Judiciary Committee. And the other was we recommended legislature do some funding for county ethics boards and commissions. Honolulu is well staffed and funded, but the neighbor islands have inadequate support. But none of those commissions came in support of the measure. So that died in committee. Now the various areas, and Representative Ward gave a handout with all the bills that passed the legislature. We weren't the only one, my commission, recommending good government bills. Various legislators introduced bills on their own. The State Ethics Commission, Campaign Spending Commission, and law enforcement had their bills introduced as well. But many of the bills, if not most of the bills, introduced on behalf of the Ethics Commission, Campaign Spending Commission, and the Law Enforcement Coalition were bills from our commission that they signed off on, took ownership of. And so our bills were introduced sometimes 2 or 3 times by legislators and different agencies. It really broke down to like 4 areas, and you can see our report online. The report, the executive summary is only about 40 pages. The rest is all the exhibits and the draft legislation. But it broke down into the strengthen the investigation and prosecution of fraud, increased transparency in government, greater ethical awareness and oversight in government, and reducing the power of money in politics. Now, for those of you that have followed the public corruption scandals at the state and county level, all the prosecution is being done by the U.S. federal government. None by our county and state law enforcement. Well, part of the reason was some of the corruption was in law enforcement, county law enforcement. So they're certainly not going to do anything, and that's why the feds came in. But also the feds had better tools. So what we did was we looked at the federal statutes being used, and we didn't have, thank you very much, and we didn't have similar statutes. So we, working with the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and law enforcement, we drafted bills modeled after federal statutes on fraud, false statements, and false claims. Also on those bills, we put in mandatory prison sentences for people that would be convicted. This was very important to former U.S. attorneys like Steve Alm, who's now our county prosecutor, Flo Nakakuni, who used to be the U.S. attorney, because they said one of the ways they got people to cooperate in the investigation, if they were also being investigated, and they realized if they didn't cooperate, there was a mandatory prison term. They weren't going to get a slap on the wrist. They weren't going to get probation. Well, our bills did pass the legislature, but the mandatory prison term did not. So if someone is charged and convicted of one of those 3 crimes, they are eligible for a deferred acceptance plea or probation. Law enforcement is going to be coming back to the legislature this coming session to try to get back the mandatory minimum. But that's a big improvement. We also, as part of that package, we had a number of bills passed to make the Campaign Spending Commission more effective and more efficient. In terms of the waiver of contested case hearings, presumption of a violation if there's no answer to a complaint, things that allow them with their limited resources to do more. And although someone looking at the various bills would say, oh, waiver of contested case hearing, default, that's Menini stuff, but it's not. It's a good commission, it has a good mandate, and we think they'll be more effective. In the area of, transparency, the bills we introduced would apply the Sunshine Law to legislative creative bodies. Now, we decided not to try to apply the Sunshine Law to the legislature because it wasn't practical. Unlike the county councils, legislature has very tight constitutional deadlines. They only meet for 60 days out of the year. Each bill has to go through 3 readings in each house. If there's substantive amendments, it may be even more. And therefore, the sort of notice, it wasn't practical. So instead we said, well, any commission, task force, or body created by the legislature is subject to the Sunshine Law. We also proposed a bill to create a Citizens' Bill of Rights. So they would have access to all bills, all changes, all budget items before they're acted on, have the right to appear, be treated appropriately, and if they felt their rights were being violated, to go to a public advocate and to have that investigated and the legislator held accountable. That did not become law, but what the House did and the Senate did not, they revised their rules and incorporated many of those provisions in their House rules. A lot of people are skeptical, well, the House isn't going to enforce these things against its own members. Well, it's up to the House to do it, to address that cynicism, and there is complaints. So if you ever feel you're in the legislature and you're not being treated properly, go to your representative, Gene Ward. They will have a select committee that's bipartisan, 3 members from each party to investigate. And he can point you in the right direction, make sure the House does what they promised they would do. We, again, tweaked the Greater Access to Public Records Bill, and that passed again. But it passed the House, but it's now in conference committee. The Senate made some changes. Preserve recordings for public meetings, that did pass and become law. Requiring candidates and non-candidates to have their online organization reports posted in the area of transparency. Require legislators to disclose relationships with lobbyists and lobbyist organizations in their financial disclosures, became law. Require lobbyists to specifically disclose all bills, resolution, budget items, or any other matter they supported, opposed, or commented on. File, that will go online, that became law. Also to have the legislators post their legislative allowance expenditures online, that again was done. So in the area of transparency of government, I think we made great progress. And it wasn't that bad, actually, before the legislature. I'm so old, I used to go to the legislature when everything was hard copy. I started going in 1984, representing the ACLU. Everything was hard copy. There were piles of documents in a room, and you had to go there every day and sort through those documents to have some idea of what was happening. The legislature now has an outstanding webpage where everything is accessible, great search engines, have no problem following any bill or resolution or any other matter. You can file your testimony online, you can appear by Zoom. There are certainly areas for improvement, and we recommended them. But there's great transparency now, I think, as the result of last session, we've made some progress. We also had bills passed, become law, that we recommend in the area of ethics, mandatory lobbying, training. Not every violation of the law is malicious. Some are just stupid. Some are just ignorant. So we figure if everybody, we've required training of state and county officials and employees, now lobbyists, everybody knows what the law is. We may have greater compliance. Prohibiting nepotism in state government. Surprise, surprise, we didn't have a law that prohibited nepotism. That passed as far as the executive branch. The legislature exempted itself, instead put it in its rules and administrative manual, and said the judiciary would enforce its own code. So we did make some progress there. So ethics, we have a very strong state ethics commission with an executive director, Robert Harris. And as part of my job is commission chair, I went through the code of ethics. I went through the laws that regulate lobbyists. It's really good. And if it's properly enforced, I think we're in pretty good shape. There's certain things like the 2 legislators. You know, if you're going to be bad, you're going to be bad. If you're going to take a bribe. But transparency helps, and constant online reporting helps, because some of these bribery scandals, a businessman just doesn't walk up to a legislator and say, here's 10 grand, can you support my bill? A relationship develops. They go out to dinner, they get some drinks, you know, the favors are done. And then all of a sudden, you know, the requests start going up, the reciprocity keeps going up. So all of these relationships are transparent. I think we have some safeguards to going into the more malicious criminal acts that we've seen. Reduce the power of money in politics. One big problem we had in doing that, and I know we have one young lawyer in our group, Citizens United. United States Supreme Court, in an opinion written by Chief Justice Roberts, equated money with speech. So nonprofits, PACs, known as super PACs, political action commissions, can spend unlimited sums of money supporting or opposing a candidate, supporting or opposing some initiative or referendum, some other matter, and their donors are confidential. And we can't touch that. So that was a real problem. Representative Maramoto tried her best to get me to write bills to get around it, and I just couldn't do it. So we had to work around that. And that's an issue at the national level. We just can't change it here. We built on our, you can't have a fundraiser during session to prohibit legislators from soliciting or accepting contributions during session. That didn't pass, and it passed the House, but it didn't get a hearing in the Senate, so it's still pending in the Carl Rhodes Committee. To right now, contractors with the state and county government cannot give campaign contributions during the duration of the contract. We wanted that expanded to grantees, people that receive like nonprofits, large grants, and extended to the officers and family members of those corporations, companies, and other organizations. That is in conference committee. So it's still possible, could move on that. Public notice for fundraisers, regardless the amount charged or suggested, that passed and became law. Limit the amount of cash to $100 campaign cycle to a candidate, and keep receipts for all cash contributions. That became law. Prohibit lobbyists from making gifts to any legislator or state employee. That became law. Eliminate, this is a really interesting one. Eliminate the use of campaign funds to purchase tickets for fundraisers. Now legislators can buy 2 tickets for a fundraiser for a candidate. We wanted to prohibit that. And something I pushed, when I started looking at this, I was surprised that legislators can use their campaign funds for almost anything. They can give to community groups, they can have scholarship funds, and it's an opportunity where someone can go to his or her Rotary Club and say, look at me, I'm giving this amount of money. Of course, they're not buying votes, but certainly, well, isn't he or she great? I'm going to support that candidate. But it's not his or her money. It's somebody else's money that gave it them. So I actually had the commission propose a bill that would limit, shocking, campaign funds to be used only on campaigns. That didn't pass. In fact, the tickets one didn't pass either. Instead, Carl Rhodes proposed an amendment to that did just the opposite, that would authorize legislators to give $2,500 to any other legislator. So you could give to all 80 or something. So that's pending in the Senate. Voters Education Guide. That was a very big deal for the League of Women Voters, and that passed and became law. And that's going to be helpful. Increased fines for campaign spending violations, and also with the super PACs, we increased the fines dramatically and will hold the individual officers of the PAC personally responsible too, trying to do what we can. Term limits. We have term limits, as you know, for the county executives, for the county council members, for the governor and lieutenant governor, but not for the legislature. So what polls I've seen, the public overwhelmingly supports term limits. So I came up with a bill that I thought, it shows my naivete. I figured, how can the legislature oppose this one? 16 years prospective, not retroactive. Well, where did the logic come from 16 years? Well, a member of the county council can serve 8 years, but it's a unicameral body. So my thought was 8 years in the House, 8 years in the Senate, or a combination thereof. You know, who's going to oppose that? It's not going to directly impact any sitting legislator because it's prospective. It didn't get out of the House Judiciary Committee. In fact, 3 of my commission members opposed it. The League of Women Voters, the executive director of the State Ethics Commission, and Common Cause Hawaii. So I was taken surprised by that. I think it's still worth pursuing. It may require a state constitutional convention to ultimately do, as opposed to the legislature themselves. But I was disappointed with that.
Judge, can I make an intervention on that one?
Please.
I was also disappointed. I even said, look, retire Representative Ward. He wants this bill to be passed. You vote for it, he'll retire. And it didn't get any votes. But I want you to know it was killed by one person, David Tarnas. He mentioned that earlier. This is another issue, Judge, that we have to face, that if one person doesn't like a bill, i.e. the chairs, the bill doesn't get a vote at all. When I joined the legislature, I don't know if you know this, Dan, when I joined the legislature in 1990, we didn't even vote in committees. There was the chair said this, the chair says that. Now we vote in committees, but if it's a no from the chair, there's no vote. And that's where, if you know, one senator who was in jail was famous for saying, I can kill a bill anytime I want. And he was bragging about that. And that's the way the rules are right now. And I hope when you guys are going to look at that again. Anyways, just want to comment.
And technically, the floor can withdraw a bill from committee, but it almost never happens. Both houses really give great deference to their committee chairs. Then the last one I'll mention, still pending in the legislature's public financing of elections. We currently have it on the books now. It's voluntary. You can't make it mandatory. You can't tell all legislators or elected officials you can't take private funds. You can't do that. So it's voluntary. But the amount of money that people running for office get is so minor, almost no one uses it. The last you probably heard was Kai Kahele. The sort of the hallmark of his failed governor's race was he was going to do public financing. He was going to take no contribution over $100. But he failed to file. You have to file a declaration swearing that's what you're going to do. He didn't do it, and by the deadline. And so that went by the wayside. So what we did was we said, well, at least double the amount from a $1 matching for every dollar raised, $2 matching. But we said if the legislature can do more, we'll support that too. So Carl Rhodes introduced a bill that would provide substantial public funding for elections, real money for whether it's OHA, mayor, county council, prosecutor, House, Senate, governor, governor up to 2.5 million to give you an idea for legislative seats, $40,000 or $50,000. That's the real money. That is in conference committee. passed out, it was Carl Rhodes' bill, so didn't have a problem passing the Senate. The House passed it, sent it back to the Senate, and then the Senate held it, having initially passed it. If for some reason, and there's a lot of public support for that, although there is some public opposition because a lot of members of the public don't want their tax dollars going to politicians running for office, and you can understand that as well. But public financing would level the playing field because it would give an opportunity to more people to run for office, and it would make many legislators not dependent on private contributions from lobbyists or any corporation or anybody that has business in the legislature. It's not a magic bullet, though. I mean, it's Carl Rhodes' bill, and he thinks this is the big fix, but it's voluntary. So Carl himself said, I was on Island Insight with him on this issue. I think he has about $100,000 or so in the bank, so he's not going to do public financing. Donovan Delacruz, I think, has $1 million in the bank. He's not going to do public funding. So there are still, people that will have a lot more money than anybody else would have receiving public funding, but it'd be a step forward. If the legislature does in fact pass it out next session, it won't be timely for the 2024 election. To get the appropriation, to get the campaign spending commission properly staffed and organized, the earliest we could have it would be 2026. So that's kind of a snapshot. Now, there's been mixed press on this. Some of you may read Civil Beat. Some people say, including the editorial board of Civil Beat, oh, nothing significant passed. I disagree. I think a lot of significant things passed. Are there some significant things that didn't pass? Yes. But again, for those of you that have dealt with the legislature, how often is it all done in 1 year? I mean, bills sometimes take 4 or 5, 6 years, going through various, amendments before they and successive legislators. So I think we've had tremendous movement. Representative Ward has been just wonderful. Even though he's in a party that's underrepresented in the House, he shows one person can make a difference. He showed up for our commission. He did his homework. He gave written and oral testimony and assisted the commission in shaping its proposals and supported them in the House. So I'd like to thank Representative Ward.
Thank you.
Please.
By the way, this is the first time I'm hearing that. I didn't know I made any difference at all.
No,
he heard everybody, and I gave you guys about 5 or 6 things that I felt rather strongly about.
Yeah, and we adopted them. So I think we've made great progress. Civil Beat will carry this. Watch it carefully, post it, stay on the legislators. So pay attention. That's probably, if you're interested in the clean government bills, look at Civil Beat. It doesn't cost anything. There's no paywall. And feel free, really, to just submit testimony. It makes a difference, written and orally. And then you can't, the people that can't complain are the ones that didn't submit testimony. I know who submitted testimony. I know how many people submitted testimony. And I see a lot of people complaining that didn't show up. I don't have much sympathy for them. I have a lot of sympathy for the ones that show up, did their best, and didn't get it. Those are the ones I support. So, become involved. Now, the one thing that may happen, the U.S. federal government has not finished its investigation. We haven't seen the last of indictments. And I think if any more legislators get indicted, I think you'll see renewed interest in many of our bills that didn't pass last session.
There's supposed to be one more shoe that drops, by the way.
Yeah.
Or that's rumored through Civil Beat. One more shoe to drop.
Yeah, and I've heard the same thing from a number of sources. So pay attention, stay involved. You can make a difference. We can make a difference. So thank you very much, and I'm available for any questions.
We're going to open it up for questions. Thank you, Judge. I forgot one kudos for you, getting back at you. This man has got East Honolulu written all over him. Do you remember Safe Sandy Beach?
Yeah.
Who's the attorney that got the issue on the ballot? Judge Dan Foley. Let's have a round of applause for Safe Sandy Beach for Judge Foley. We had forgotten about that. And the other thing was all the testimony that you took was greatly appreciated. He listened very strong and clearly. Okay, those are the opening comments. Now, what are your questions? You want to drill down deeper, or you got something that is related to any of those specific issues, whether it's term limit, ethics, etc.? Who has got a question? And Kyle, do we have a mobile mic or we don't have? Yes, sir, please.
Okay, your resume said you spent some time in Micronesia. You know, the Micronesian immigrants that come here, they have such a hard time adjusting. They get in trouble with the law. I don't know if it's a cultural thing or what your opinion would be on that. Since you spent time with them, they come to Hawaii. It's just like, I don't know, how is it ever going to get ahead? They get into troubles, and I don't know. It's a hard time adjusting for them.
Okay, I will repeat the question for those who may not have heard it or particular by the video. The Micronesians, you have spent time in Micronesia as a judge. Some of the times that were there, some of the difficult times that are here, being that they have been probably the largest homeless group, and some of the difficulties that I think you want to get a sense of. What can you tell us about the Micronesians and their adjustment in Hawaii?
Inang Mesiri Kapasanchuk. That means I speak a little Chukese. I was out there 8 years. I was in Micronesia for 8 years, from 75 to 83. I wrote a number of their constitutions. I helped them negotiate their political status, the Compact of Free Association that allows them to come here. I wrote their statutes implementing their constitutions, and I serve currently on the Palau Supreme Court. So I'm very familiar with that area. What happened in Micronesia is kind of shocking. We inherited the United States, Micronesia, which was called the Trust Territory of the Pacific Island, at the end of World War II. It had been occupied by the Japanese. And so the United States was mandated by the United Nations, it was under the Security Council, to bring Micronesia into independence. But the US didn't do much, so Kennedy commissioned a committee called the Solomon Committee. Take a look. What do we do? A classified version of that report, part of that report was filed. This was during the Cold War. The US said we should destroy their economy. They were self-sufficient at the end of World War II. They grew, caught, ate their own food, built their own houses.
Wait, did you say it was in the report to destroy the economy?
Yes. To make Micronesia dependent on the US and to have a referendum to have them vote to become part of the US like the Northern Marianas did. Because they didn't want China, which is now playing around with the area, or the Soviet Union to enter. So that was the plan. So they destroyed the economy. So Micronesia became dependent on imported goods, as opposed to salted fish, canned fish, as opposed to taro and breadfruit, rice and bread, alcohol, tobacco, motorboats. And then the value started to change. And so what happened was, when they negotiated the Compact of Free Association, they gave the United States military rights and veto power over foreign affairs. And in return, the right to migrate here. They have the legal right to migrate here under the Compact of Free Association. That was negotiated. So they come, and they're not prepared. As you point out, there are language issues, there are cultural issues, there are skills. You go to any fast food place, 7-Eleven, you'll see a lot of, they're primarily Chukis and Marshallese. They take the lowest income jobs. They can't afford their own place. So some of them are actually working homeless. Or they all live in one apartment and then they get evicted because they believe in extended family. They can't say no. So if a relative shows up, they have a place to stay. So it's an issue, and then to compound the problem for the state of Hawaii, the compact required the federal government to reimburse the state for expenses incurred because of the immigration. Federal government hasn't done so. But it's the duty of the federal government to do so, because it costs the state money. So it is an issue. It's an issue I've met with education officials. Many come and they're not fluent in English. Their values are different. I love Micronesians. If you live there, they're wonderful people. And a lot of people don't realize one of the contributions, one person can make a difference. We all know about the Hawaiian navigation. That is because of a navigator from Micronesia, Maupialuk, from the little island of Sarawal, who met Nainoa Thompson and who taught the Hawaiians to navigate again. That gift came from a Micronesian. That's a priceless gift.
For Hokulea.
Yes.
Yes, the captain of the Hokulea.
Yeah,
I know.
I was in Majuro.
I can reach, you can reach it.
Okay. I was in Majuro. If I'm not mistaken, that's part of Micronesia.
Marshall Islands.
At Majuro, yeah. I was shocked at, it was like third world. I couldn't believe it. They lived like in these cardboard, the dogs running around, you can see their bones. It was very depressing. I got off the ship for maybe an hour and I went right back on.
Well,
I couldn't believe the way they lived.
you're lucky you didn't visit Ebi. The largest atoll in Marshall Islands is Kwajalein Atoll. It has the missile base. And so the missiles are shot from Kauai and there. And it's very important strategically. So the U.S. found the Marshall Islands very important, a lot of money. Now there's one little small island on Kwajalein Atoll called Ebi. And there's actually just everything is just, it's all pavement and tin and plywood houses. When I was there, it reminded me of apartheid South Africa. The Micronesians were not allowed to live in the area where the expatriates lived. They were all, which was luxurious, theaters, bowling alleys, all kinds of stuff. They were all cramped together on this little tiny island. Exactly. And ferried it back and forth. So that's the U.S. legacy in the Marshall Islands. Before the U.S. legacy, all the houses were naturally air-conditioned, thatched, wood, built themselves. But the U.S. introduced the plywood, the tin, and promoted that. So, there are issues. Now, the biggest issue, of course, for the Marshall Islands, they're all atolls. And if you've been to an atoll, they're only 6 feet above water. It's not going to exist in the future. They'll be here. And in Arkansas, next to a Tyson chicken plant. It's the other massive migration area for Marshallese. So it's,
Kwajalein, isn't that where SpaceX is? Elon Musk, is it his launch pad at Kwajalein?
No.
SpaceX?
No.
It's one island, though.
Not Micronesia yet.
Okay.
It's not there yet. The tech industry is trying to establish itself in Palau.
Okay, other questions of the good judge?
I do.
This,
Hi, my name's
Yeah.
Joy.
Joy, step up a little bit
Okay.
more, and then everybody
Joy
can hear.
Whitaker from Honolulu over here, just next door. I see on your ethics bill here that you have relating to official misconduct. So I want to know what official misconduct is in the permitting department.
Official means
I know I'm making jest. I just thought about official misconduct, but I thought, where are you doing anything with the permitting and misconduct there at all? Or are you involved in that? Or is there anything you can do?
we were looking, the county has its own ethics commission, and they weren't interested. They submitted no testimony, made no appearance before our state commission. But the one area where we did look was the first area I talked about in terms of false statements, false claims, fraud. And I think our county prosecutor now, Steve Alm, is very interested in looking at all the county agencies to uncover any corruption and to prosecute. So Steve Alm is a dear friend of mine, full disclosure, but I have absolute confidence that he will be very diligent in trying to uncover corruption, whether it's within that office or any state or county office.
The reason it's so important is because we have old buildings here. All of our condominiums are very old, and so we're all upgrading. We're doing things. We need permits, and it's been terrible.
The upgrading of buildings is not only important that they get upgraded, but it's slowing our economy down.
Yes,
The DPP,
exactly.
I mean, right now we have a group of people working on how we're going to rebuild Maui, how we're going to restore their economy, how are we going to do it. And DPP is going to, well, the department for the Mauians is going to be really a very frustrating run. But there is a lesson from Iniki. Remember the Kauai put a pop-up approval tents where unless it was something really outside the ordinary, it got approval rather quickly. But DPP is really, it's a very good question, but something that is really difficult to resolve.
But I think your point's a good one, because if you have such an important office that so many people depend on, that need, and it's not run efficiently, it becomes an area where people want to illegally get to the front of the line, and that's what's happened.
In fact, one of our Beer Summit speakers was Don Takimoto Apuna about, Jillian, how long ago was that? In January. We must have not got the word out because in fact, I think we were at the marina at the time. But that's a very key issue. We may invite her back because unless we unstick those permitting issues, we're going to have really a hard time getting back to normal. Other questions to the good judge? Things that come to mind. Any lawyers have any questions in the back row? By the way, that's my daughter, Johanna. She's going to feel embarrassed. Why did you say that I just passed the bar exam last week? Oh, because she just did pass the bar exam. Yay, Johanna. Surprised her parents and made them proud.
All
Question.
that money was well spent.
Yeah.
To go back to the Micronesians, do you have a solution for the issues why there's so many homeless?
You know, I had met with Macy Hirono on that, and you know, with the homeless, number one, there's all different types of people that are homeless. There's working homeless, there's people with alcohol, drug abuse homeless, there's people with mental health. But with the Micronesians, it's just a matter of economics. You know, they have the right to come here, and they'll go to a relative's house or apartment. In Micronesia, you can do that. There are no homeless in Micronesia. It doesn't exist. If you go to a house, you're accepted, you're in. So they come here, and the relative says, I can't let you stay because I'll be evicted. You know, it's a small apartment. My landlord says only 4 people or whatnot. If it's your brother-in-law, you can't say no. You get evicted, they're all on the streets, or you say no, the others are on the streets. So it's just a matter of desperation. I think it will take care of itself, as with a lot of immigrant groups over each generation. Micronesians are becoming, in particular the Chukis and Marshallese. Palauans, you don't see Palauan homeless. Palauans have more doctors and lawyers and professional people. There are lawyers and doctors here to a certain extent. Yapis don't leave, the outer island people do. So they're all different. But in terms of the Chuka and the Marshallese, the biggest, each generation is becoming better educated, more fluent in English, greater job skills. They have a good Micronesian organization here that's trying to address it, trying to work with agencies. So I think people are working at it and making small progress, but it's going to take maybe a generation or two, but it will happen, and they'll become integrated.
And they don't want to go back to Micronesia?
What do they say? Something about once off the farm. You know, the opportunities are so limited there. The healthcare system, so many come here for healthcare because it's just not available. Or the education system is just not the same. And they just want, like any parent, want greater opportunity for their children, and they see it here. Some, like the Yapis, you know, I wrote their constitution. That's the most traditional group. Most Yapis are very fine in Yap. They figured they got the best place in the world. But people from the atolls, They gotta come because their homes are going to disappear underwater.
Judge, didn't you suggest that the Tyson's chicken people without Micronesians would?
Well, it's interesting. Tyson chicken plant in Arkansas, you had a number of Marshallese go there, and they paid really good wages, great health benefits, pension plan, and now you have thousands of Marshallese that have their own church, their own stores, integrated well into the education system, very prosperous, in that community in Arkansas.
And buying a house for less than $100,000, and hard to go back to the farm once you get out in that one. Other comments, questions? How about from a Foreign Service officer who worked for the nation of the United States for so long? Mr. Monk, please.
Thank you, Jim. I'm not going to make a Foreign Service comment or question, though. I want to go back to, you briefly mentioned in talking about the impact of money in politics, that one of the big obstacles to doing anything about that is the Citizens United Supreme Court decision of 2010. And clearly nothing can be done in a substantial way on a national level to reduce the impact of money unless something can be done to reverse or modify that decision. About, I want to say 10 years or so ago, I was working with a group under Common Cause on a constitutional amendment proposal, which is still alive and it gets reintroduced every session in the Congress. It's called the We the People Amendment. Common Cause is one of several organizations that support it. There's some that are just straight good government organizations like Common Cause. Others have more progressive agendas, like there's a group called Move to Amend. But the fundamental principle is the same: to amend the Constitution to say that only people are people, corporations are not people, and that government at the both national and state level can regulate corporations, and that money is not speech. Those are the two principles. How do you feel about that? Do you think that that's a valuable initiative to pursue?
Well, it may be one of the only two. Because the U.S. Supreme Court's decision is based on the First Amendment, Congress can't override it. Can't override it by statute, because they said this is your freedom of speech. So it takes a constitutional amendment. So that's one of the only two games in town. The other game, which the Democrats tried when they controlled both houses, when Biden first came in and couldn't do it, was to expand the number of justices on the U.S. Supreme Court. The numbers on the U.S. Supreme Court, 9 is not in the Constitution, it's set by statute. It's changed over the years, it's gone up, it's gone down. So there was a bill to add 4 new justices, which would allow them to reverse Citizens United. But that didn't go anywhere then, it's not going to go anywhere now. So if you disagree with Citizens United, that's the most surgical way, the constitutional amendment addressing the court decision. We had a court decision years ago, Texas v. Johnson, on burning the U.S. flag. It was an opinion written by Anton Scalia, a very conservative justice, but he said this Texas ordinance that prohibited in this county burning the American flag violated the First Amendment, was content-based. If the ordinance was shaped, you can't burn anything in a public place, it would have been upheld, it would have been content neutral, but they said American flag. So there was a real push in the Congress for a constitutional amendment to overturn that. It didn't pass. And one of the reasons it didn't pass was Dan Foley, who actually opposed it in the Senate because he was a strong First Amendment guy, strong independent judiciary, clearly a loyal American, patriotic American, but he pretty much killed it in the Senate. But the approach you're suggesting, if the votes are there, I mean, that would do it.
I just want to add one brief thing, which is I'm on the Honolulu Ethics Commission, and I'm not here representing the commission, but a couple of months ago, we and the State Ethics Commission and the other county ethics commissions held a conference, and Judge Foley came and spoke to us. And just want to express our appreciation again for your having
Thank
contributed
you.
to that event.
Thank you. Thank you for
Good.
your work.
Thank you, David. The bottom line, money is speech. And if you know one of the second biggest issues in my office, other than the Hawaiian issues, are the ALICE issues. Asset limited, income challenged, employed, meaning the working poor. We have a big issue, which would, in the political sense, would mean there's a lot of disenfranchised people if money is speech. And that's a really a tall order, David, but look, you've got the time and the energy to do that. But if you look at, and this is a little bit of, I guess, a sneak preview, which hopefully when you do come back with more things in the 2024 session, if you look at the campaign spending contributions for those who are chairs versus the non-chairs, night and day. He mentioned earlier, just in passing, chair of Judiciary of the Senate has $100,000. The chair of the YWAM, not the YWAM, the Ways and Means Committee, $1 million. Why do they have the funds? Because of the position they have. So if we want to level the playing field from private to public funding, it's got to be where the chairs particularly are the ones to be watched, because those who are non-chairs are really outside. And those particular on the other side of the aisle are certainly the lesser of those who are the donors of any private or public thing. Just an FYI on that, Judge. Other questions? Before, yes, sir.
I don't know what your opinion is, or if you're involved with Donna Leong. Her trial is delayed, and the two other guys, I forget their names, but why is the trial so delayed? And were you involved, or what's your opinion on those two?
These are three people that were charged by the federal government for packaging the buyout for the chief of police, Kealoha. And their position is, all three of them, they were following correct procedure. The U.S. attorney said they were violating federal law, that it was deceptive, et cetera, et cetera. Each side has asked for continuances in that case, and the judge has granted them. I think trial is scheduled for spring now of 2024. And, innocent until proven guilty, if that's the case. But I think of all the cases I've seen, that's one where at least Max Sword, who used to be chair of the police commission, and Roy Amamiya, used to be managing director, they were relying on the advice of corporation counsel that this procedure is correct. So they may have a defense.
Judge, let me follow up with that. In that you said earlier, it's only the feds that are bringing these things forward. What do we lack in the state or at the county level that doesn't bring forth these charges or prosecutions?
Well, most criminal prosecutions are brought by county prosecutors. And you know why the Honolulu county prosecutor wasn't bringing them, because they were right in the middle of it.
Okay.
And the current prosecutor's been indicted, Keith Kaneshiro. So I think that's changed with the new prosecutor, and I do expect the county prosecutors and the state attorney general, which got a new division to look into this by the legislature and given funds. And both the Attorney General's office and the county prosecutors were very active with my commission, is very active with the U.S. Attorney Claire Connor, and all working together. So I think we're going to see more state and county involvement in the investigation and prosecution of corruption.
Very encouraging for doing that. Do you remember the Supreme Court Justice by the name of Mike Wilson? This is a constituent who looks almost, I have to take a double take sometimes when doesn't he? Mike Wilson is your good friend?
He's better looking.
Mr. Wilson, please.
I have a very short question. I just want to know if we have good whistleblower laws that could reveal why these politicians in power get so much money?
Well, it's interesting.
Good question.
I was talking with Representative Ward. My first corruption case here in Hawaii was in the 1980s when I was the ACLU legal director. There was a whistleblower who was a sheriff, and he blew the whistle on the judiciary. The sheriff's department was part of the judiciary back then for corruption. They were doing fundraisers for legislators. They were using their money and resources to promote legislators who then would give them what they wanted in terms of the budget. They were fixing tickets for government officials. And this one sheriff blew the whistle and he was fired. He blew the whistle to Representative Fred Hemmings.
Yeah.
And Ian Lynn, who was head of Common Cause at the time, and he was fired. So Fred tried to find a lawyer. He couldn't find anyone. No one wanted to sue the Hawaii Supreme Court, but I did, and we won. But I was surprised when I was putting together the lawsuit, we had no whistleblower act. There was no statute. So I had to do it under the First and 14th Amendment, which was a little more difficult. But we won. The guy got a settlement, moved to California, went to law school, became a successful lawyer. So it had a happy ending. But as a result of that, I worked with Fred Hemmings and I wrote the first Whistleblower Act, which became law at the end of the 80s. And that allows a whistleblower to file a state court action in circuit court, get damages, attorney fees, and costs. Problem with that is public, though. Everybody knows it's you, small island, a lot of people are reluctant to do that. There's other ways, easier ways to be a whistleblower. You can file a complaint with State Ethics Commission, and that's confidential. They won't know your name. And if the State Ethics Commission doesn't feel they have jurisdiction, they'll refer to the County Ethics Commission or a prosecutor or the U.S. Attorney's Office. So there are some vehicles now. I don't think the problem is so much the law, it's the culture. Randy Roth always talks about this and writes about this. People just don't want to stick their neck out. It's a small community. When I was in ACLU or civil rights lawyers, some people would come to me with an employment issue, like a sexual harassment or a race discrimination or some other protected activity. And I would look at the case and tell them whether they had a case. And even when they had a case, I would tell them, I can't guarantee you I can protect you. I can file your complaint. You may get a settlement. You may get a judgment, but you may have a very difficult time getting a job later on. That's just the reality.
That is the reality, and the pressure we feel in the legislature is the get along to go along to get along. It's really an integral part of the culture, and particularly when it becomes the political or legal things, it's even there. I didn't know there was a whistleblowing statute. Particularly, I didn't know that he was the one behind it. So more kudos to you, Judge, for what you've done for not only the Peace Corps.
I don't play golf, so this will use my time.
Okay, and nobody bought you off. Okay, other questions before we wrap up? I know there's a question from that young man. Elijah, you got a question? Oh, I was reading your face incorrectly. And my daughter stepped out, so we don't get a question from the new graduate. My question would be, if I have it, will you be coming back to take a new look at the old bills that didn't pass that you said were there? Because there's one that I have a particular grievance with. I'm a member of a committee and I ask a lot of questions, obviously. I love that. I love querying what's behind some of the logic of some of the bills, because some of it's rather esoteric. But the fact is, we do not see other people's testimony. And Judge, this to me is painful, because I like to read every bill and all the testimony before I go into the hearing. We don't get the testimony until like 20 minutes before the hearing goes. Or sometimes it's 10 minutes. And if you're part of the public, you don't see what the testifiers have said or sent in until the next day. I would hope and encourage you to get them to, come on, let's get on with it, to have this stuff readily available. You said it's now, we're not doing hard copy, we're doing electronic copy. We can do a better job.
Well, we recommended that all written testimony be available to the public when it's filed,
Wow.
and
that's
no
super.
later than 24 hours before a committee hearing. And if it's filed later, as it's filed, post it. I haven't appeared before all the committees. I've appeared primarily before the judiciary committees, but the Senate Judiciary Committee wouldn't publish the testimony until about 5 or 10 minutes before the hearing.
Yeah.
So you don't have time to read it. But the House Judiciary Committee would post it early that morning or the evening before. So when I testified before the House Judiciary Committee, I had access to all the written testimony because I agree with Representative Ward, it should be done. And it made me a far more effective witness because I could address it right there. So it is a recommendation. There's no excuse not to do it.
Exactly.
And it should be done. And I don't know why it's not being done.
Because the less people know, the least they can probe and go deeper into some of the issues that are probably at the side or the motivation of some of the
It
legislation.
becomes public eventually, so
Yeah.
why not earlier rather than later?
Exactly. And the testifying, it's so easy nowadays, but the fact is that you will not be able to see it in a timely manner, particularly legislators who have to vote on that stuff immediately. Anyways, that's one I would greatly encourage you, Judge, to follow
Now I'm
through
acting as a private citizen, so I will.
Okay, final questions. My daughter's back. No questions from Johanna. Okay, if that is the case, Judge, closing comments. What would you say to the people of Hawaii Kai which they should expect in 2024 regarding the standards of conduct that you worked so long on, and what 20 out of 28, that's a pretty good track record of passage in the legislature. What can we expect in the 2024 session?
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for having me here, and thank you for coming. The fact that you're here shows you care, and if there's more citizens like you, we're going to do more. My experience with the legislature, they generally don't do things they don't have to do in an area like this. They did what they did last time because of the pressure, because of the indictments and the convictions. The public was demanding it. If the public demands it, they'll do it. You have a very effective representative who's trying to do it, but he can't do it by himself. My experience as a civil rights lawyer, an ACLU lawyer, a lawyer that did same-sex marriage, some of you may not like that one person can make a difference. If you work hard, if you stay focused, and you never give up. All you have to do is say, the current state of government is unacceptable. It's unacceptable, and I will not stop until it's changed. And if you work with your family and your friends and your fellow members of this district or across the county or the state, it will get done. You know, Gene and I were on opposite sides of this issue, but when I filed the same-sex marriage case on May 1 of 1991, everybody thought I was crazy. I even told the clients, I don't think you can prevail. But I stuck to it. I stayed focused. I never gave up. All 50 states and 30 plus countries have same-sex marriage today because one lawyer took the case and didn't give up. That's a bigger hill to climb than improving our ethics laws, I assure you. So never give up. You know, you're the boss. You know, Gene was talking about how the legislature works, how committee chairs wield this power. It's true. But if you look at the rules, members of the committee can override, the floor can override, and who decides who's in the legislature? The people. So ultimately, it comes to you putting pressure on your members. Be heard, be seen, and let them know you're never going to go away.
Judge, thank you for that chochili and send off. Never, ever give up. Let's give him a round of applause from Hawaii Kai. Thank you, Judge. Well said.
Thank you, Jim.